Hi, my name is Ken Lassison. I wrote the Microbiome prescriptions website, and as you can see, I have upgraded my microphone, and I'm hoping that the sound quality on this blog post will be significantly better than prior ones, and it will be a lot more understandable. As a FYI for many people, usually YouTube will automatically add closed captions to the video. So you may want to make sure that they are turned on, and you may have an easier time reading the words along with my speech. Okay, this video is going to be a bit longer than the usual because it is for a person who approached me to do analysis. It quickly became apparent in communications with her that she's new to the microbiome. And for her sake, and for anybody else new to the microbiome, I thought I should go and, especially with better sound, go and do a bit of a longer introduction and longer analysis. First thing, the person went and did a 16S microbiome test. These usually are Biomesite, which is a UK-based company that ships worldwide, or what is now known as Ombre, used to be Thrive, which at present only ships to the US, possibly because of regulatory issues. So both of those sites allow either a transfer, which is what Biomesite does, or a download and upload of your microbiome data. Now, the microbiome data which you'll get back will describe probably somewhere between 500 up to 1,300 different bacteria. They are higher or lower than other people's or whatever. Now, that immediately creates a problem for somebody trying to figure out what to do. Historically, people like naturopaths and family practice MDs will be aware of perhaps half a dozen bacteria in general. Generally, the ones they know are the ones which are directly connected with an illness, where you have one bacteria, one illness association. For example, poisoning from E. coli, Lyme disease, many other times there's conditions such as diarrhea, which they would wave their hand because they don't know exactly which bacteria you have which is causing it. They're not about to go out and do the testing for it. So they work on assumptions as to what the bacteria is. I am, by training, heavily into science, mathematics, rigorous logical programming. I'm a data nerd, as you can see from the t-shirt. I'm also ex-Microsoft employee, ex-Amazon employee, ex-Starbucks employee, ex-Verizon employee, and generally for those companies I was doing a combination of data science, artificial intelligence, and computer application programming. Combination, often same company, I may wear all three hats. Also was a high school science teacher, also was instructor of sciences at college level, and also taught computer science at the third and fourth year level for companies such as University of Washington, Chapman University, University of British Columbia. So that's my general background. Now, let's go back to the sample. You have a sample that comes up. You get more information than likely your naturopath or your MD can handle. They would generally go and focus on the bacteria names that they know and work on there. And they will usually go on, how would I say it, almost hearsay as to what you should do with it. Sometimes the hearsay comes from a course which they did at university 5, 10, 25 years ago, and they have not really updated their learning. Either the updated learning has not been easily available to them, or they have been too busy doing other things. They have a full practice and they simply learn what is needed to be reasonably efficient for what they are practicing. So that's the backstory as to what happened. So now what we're going to do is look at one person sample, an interesting person sample, and we're going to go through it to see what's going on and some things that should be examined with the typical person. In this case, this person has very severe shifts of her microbiome, and has been through literally a ton of doctors, including naturopaths, has gotten all sorts of diagnoses, has been put on this thing or that thing, often because of either no testing and it is assumed from symptoms that this person has that, or it is assumed from some cases, for example, Lyme, where the test is not necessarily that reliable. Reactivation of Epstein-Barr virus in a person will cause a Lyme test to be positive. And if you have microbiome dysfunction, Epstein-Barr will often, very often, be reactivated, which means you end up with a false positive for Lyme. Okay, let's shut up about that and let's take a look at the person. There's a blog there. Basically, person has been on everything, depressants, everything. She has about 50 different symptoms which she has recorded, done things like hyperbaric oxygen therapy, has got obtained a home sauna, even obtained a home hyperbaric oxygen chamber, changed diet, gone completely off gluten, done ozone injection into the blood, has gone through pretty much all of the major alternative methods of treating, as well as conventional medicine. In other words, she has been around the block. And so it's my turn to step up to the plate. Now, where I am is a little bit different, is I'm trying to be far more open and honest. I happen to not be doing this for a living. My main job, which brings money in, is basically software engineering, which pays me well. I don't need extra income coming in from this. And I've suffered from microbiome issues, so I have empathy and want to help people. So I have a blinkered view, as in I'm not a medical professional. I will not get involved in all the medical issues involved because I'm not trained to know what the combination is. What I am is a good data nerd, a data scientist. I understand enough of the fundamentals to be able to put a mathematical model to it and to build artificial intelligence engine to use the data. And I know how to harvest the data from many sources in rather large quantities. So the result is I have data, I have scales, I'm able to produce a artificial intelligence system which works off all the data available, and more importantly, which generally a naturopath cannot do and an MD cannot do. I can document the complete evidence trail, all the evidence and all the bits of evidence and where it's come from complete, which means I'm not doing any fuzzy logic. I'm going directly from hard facts or statements of facts or of results, to be more precise, found in studies. And I'm only using that information. I'm not going from gut feeling or anything else. Excuse the expression. I'm going from what we actually know. And I can point to the studies for every little bit of information. This is where this information is coming from. That is where that bit of information is coming from. So in other words, you have probably the highest quality evidence in terms of what you should be doing, or it is based on fact, on logic, and that's it. Just straightforward. So first thing is I loaded the person's sample up, and we'll walk through what I'm talking about later in the video. And the first thing I do is I look and see the number of conditions where her microbiome would suggest that she has any one of a ton of different conditions. Doesn't mean she has them, but her shifts are the type of severe shifts you see in all sorts of different things, from asthma to hay fever to gout to long COVID to ADHD, metabolic syndrome. Her bacteria matches, and she is at a 96 percentile for one item, which means that 96% of people have a poorer match to the bacteria listed from clinical studies than she does. So this is again studies from the U.S. National Library of Medicine, where they find certain bacteria shifts were found in people with these medical conditions. And I took that information, looked at all of her bacteria, and 2,000 plus other people in my sample base and see where she ranks in terms of being a match for the pattern which was described. And she's sitting high in tons of them. And that generally means when you have so many hits, you have a major dysfunction. Now, the next thing I did was actually really ended up saying, okay, let's go and look at it in terms of, are these rare bacteria, which most people know about, or hopefully will know about, or are these common bacteria, which most people would know about, or are these very rare bacteria, which we have very little information about, and thereby doctors said, I don't know how to treat it. I have no idea. If they're honest, or they may, I know something such and such, and they would maybe go and say, okay, well, we need an antibiotic. And they go and suggest an antibiotic without any evidence that the antibiotic will actually affect the bacteria which is being described. And here we have the percentile. So this is a ranking of where her bacteria rating is in terms of there. And in the bacteria that we see in only 10% of the people, she has 294 of those bacteria, which are very rare bacteria. Where bacteria which are seen in 10 to 20% of the people, she has 65, they're 65. But as you go up and look at the bacteria that 90 to 100% of the people have, she has 29 of them. And we would expect the distribution to be pretty much even if she had a normal microbiome, just randomness. She doesn't. She has a big spike of bacteria which are in the rare one. So in other words, most of the things that are causing the problem are things which we have probably little conventional knowledge about. As I mentioned, often a doctor, when confronted with a bacteria they don't know what to do with, will literally grab a probiotic out of the air or something which they have used, or, well, this one seems to have worked well for a bunch of other people. A bunch of other people probably have totally different microbiome, totally different thing, but it is what he is accustomed to prescribing, and so he's crossing his fingers and hoping it will work. The system I have looks at what we know about probably 2,500 different drugs, antibiotics, and we can actually, using the information in the database, which I'll show you a bit later where we get the data from, can actually rank things as to which ones are good and which ones are bad. And in this particular case, she was given some antibiotics. She felt she got worse from it. And when I look at the list of negative benefits, guess what? The ones she were given that she felt worse on were the ones which had a calculated negative benefit. So this little bit of fun is interesting because it potentially can help your MD pick a better antibiotic or other drug for you than what he would normally pick, because he will totally ignore the microbiome, your gut bacteria. Do it. And if your gut bacteria goes worse and you get worse digestive issues, he will say, how in the world do I know? Actually, it is possible to know, and the information is here, which you can take to your physician and say, look, this is what is calculated out. I believe what you are suggesting for me will probably make my gut issues worse, or any of the ones over here, something which will be acceptable for addressing the conditions you're trying to treat, because these are predicted to help my gut bacteria. So it will be a double blessing. It will be two birds with one antibiotic. The treatment, the condition he's trying to help, as well as the microbiome, which indirectly impacts probably the conditions you're trying to help. Okay, at this point of time, we sort of see where the person is. We have some general feel. So now comes the question of what do we do? Okay, first thing is we end up with we really don't have a great amount of knowledge about a whole bunch of those rare bacteria. Some of them, if you go to the U.S. National Library of Medicine and search for them, you'll find 1, 2, perhaps 3 articles on the entire site. None about treating it as a condition for humans, or even what change increases or decreases. Often they are, hey, we just discovered this new bacteria. And that's it. So what we are able to do with a little bit of magic is go over to the Kyoto Encyclopedia of Genomics and actually look at the DNA of the bacteria you have, and also look at the DNA of bacteria in different probiotics. Now, when I say we look at the DNA, if you look at any bacteria out there and look at its DNA, you'll probably find that it produces one bacteria, one potential cell, produces something like 1,700 different enzymes, probably 12 to 1,400 different compounds, and it will consume probably 8 to 1,200 compounds. However, just a single bacteria is a very complicated little creature. And guess what? You don't have just one of them, you have 700 to 800 of them, which means you got 700 or 800 times 1,200 enzymes. You got a whopping big, huge number of enzyme amounts floating around. The system I ended up writing basically takes all that information and condenses it to some concrete suggestions. First of all, because probiotics are bacteria, we are able to look at the enzymes and the compounds that the bacteria in our probiotic produce. We can look at what the production is from your microbiome, and we can say, okay, what enzymes is this person short of? What compounds is not being produced as much? And how do we judge that? We judge that by comparing it to everybody else in the sample of 2,200, 2,500 different things. So we end up using percentile ranking greatly because it is the best way of figuring out what's going on when you don't have lots of appropriate studies being available and published. So when we did that, we end up having a list of probiotics suggested. Again, we'll look at the page later. And what we have here is the name of the retail version of the probiotic. So rather than saying you need this particular bacteria in your probiotic, and you're coming back to me and saying, excuse me, which probiotic has it? Or you spend 5 hours on Amazon trying to find a particular strain of probiotic, and you discover nobody on it lists it. There's a product that has it, but they don't bother listing the species. So I try making life easier. I have about 250 to 300 commercial retail products there, and I do a matchup against those products so that you know what product to look for. And then I'll give the ranking in terms of the impact. The bigger the number, the better it is. This one, Miroricin, which is Clostridium butyricum, comes out of Japan, but it's available in the US and most of the world. It has the absolute biggest impact. Then we have another one. An example of one of the products that has it is TerraFlora, soil-based organism probiotic, SBO, soil-based organism. And it consists of 5 different bacteria in it. Then we have Lactobacillus plantarum probiotic power, which is the next one down, and then another one which if you notice here, it has a lot of the same ones are here, but this one comes out better because of the extra items in it, because they have things which are better match for what you're missing than this combination. Then we end up with another one. Again, this one we see we have a different bacillus here. We have Clostridium butyricum. So we have a couple of overlaps there, and we have Enterococcus faecalis there. But then we go down a little notch more, and guess what? We find a probiotic, which this one is from Germany. And they will ship all over the world. and it is just this one particular species, and then we Lactobacillus casei. The thing you should notice is that most of these names are not in your health food store probiotics listing. They simply are not there. They are available, but they are not promoted. The salespeople aren't busy trying to convince stores to stock them. Rather, the ones which are generally the biggest marketing are the ones which you will find on the shelf. We then do one more. The bacteria in your body does processing, and it produces things. It produces a variety of chemicals. And in terms of the amount we estimate are being produced, you can see the ones which are very low. Again, the key word is percentile. In terms of the ones that has an output as magnesium, you are a 1%. 99 out of 100 people will produce more magnesium than you will. You're probably going to be magnesium deficient. Another one here is glutamine. You are at 5.9. This particular person, from her lab test, she found she was indeed deficient in this one. So it's confirmed what is there. You could get most of these, you should be able to get confirmed by lab tests. And you'll probably be surprised that the numbers are reasonably accurate as to whether or not you're high or low. Now, at this point, if you are new to the whole area, I would say stop. You have enough to work on. You have enough to get going with what's there. The next section is for those who have started to become more familiar with the microbiome. And what we are looking at next is we are not looking at the DNA. What we are doing is looking at shifts higher or low of individual bacteria, and then identifying which bacteria shifted the wrong or the right way. And then we go and look at the medical literature to find out what compounds will cause something to go up or to go down, and then take all that information together, which is a big hunk of information, and say, okay, if we want to reduce this particular bacteria, here is a list of items which will reduce it. If you want to reduce that bacteria, here's a list of items that reduce it. But sometimes in that list is a substance which will cause what you're trying to number of bacteria you're trying to reduce to go up. In other words, you end up with a dilemma having to figure out between two. The system does it for you. And what we have is we also have the fact that there is disagreement, great disagreement, on how to pick which bacteria you should focus on. Rather than arguing that I have a better way of doing it than anybody else, I'm a lazy person. And what I have done is I've put different criteria there. And you can go and use each one of the criteria to get suggestions. Once you get the suggestions, you can actually get all the results from suggestion put into one big massive list, which can be 6, 7, 8, 900 items. And from that list, you can see things which are absolutely safe to take, as in we have no known negative impact on any of the bacteria we're trying to shift, to the extent that we have literature for it. And you also will get in a list things you should avoid, things you should take out of your diet. Sometimes it's a surprise. For example, often naturopaths and MDs will ask you to do a B complex. And what we ended up finding some people is you should be doing B12 and B6. You should not be doing B1 and B5, which means if you're doing a B complex, that's probably why it's not helping because you are half pushing in one direction, half pushing in the other direction, and you go nowhere. Okay, so we went and did it, and as we'll see, what I found interesting to this person is that the number selected for many of the methods was much lower than usual. The Cutoff Molotov came up with 137, and when it went to percentile, it went through the roof. And that's very obvious because, as you saw up above, we have a ton of rare bacteria. So this type of spread here is very atypical. And there we go through. When I went through the list, I took a look down, and lo and behold, a lot of the stuff on the list as the top suggestions matched the suggestions coming from the DNA. The DNA method and this method are totally independent of each other. The only thing they have in common is they both use the microbiome result. From that point onwards, everything is calculated totally different ways, but they come to a consensus. And then we have a bunch of things to avoid. For example, saccharin and stevia, which often people will do in order to cut down sugar, but it also, for some people, will make their microbiome dysfunction worse. So it is, you are addressing one issue and causing a second issue. So that's why the type of in-depth analysis which I'm trying to do is intended to stop you shooting yourself in the foot when you're trying to fix one thing and something else breaks, and voila, you have another problem and you get frustrated because nothing seems to be working. Okay, once you go up there and you get a consensus suggestion, you can download all of them into a spreadsheet, or you can go on. Now, the site allows you to enter your symptoms. When you enter your symptoms, then we can make use of the symptoms which you have entered and look at other people who have entered the same symptom. And we can then look at what bacteria all you guys have in common, which are high or low. And once we see what you are in common, then what we can do is say, okay, we'll find this particular bacteria is high, this bacteria is low in the whole group. Or is your high or is low, your low, then we include it. If it's not, we don't include it. So it ends up allowing us to get a very filtered, very targeted collection of bacteria to try to adjust. And that is a sweet little thing. And it is sometimes can be actually quite shocking with how accurate it seems to be for helping people. At this point, I'm going to hop over to the website and see about walking you through things. Okay, we have moved over to the Microbiome Prescription website, and I've done it full screen. And you can see my prescription, and we've done a login with a particular person's identity. I'll be changing the identity login in a moment. So what we have is you have a variety of buttons here. You have an old menu system, which I won't deal with because the new menu system is a lot easier. And the first thing you may want to do is My Profile. And My Profile gives you a variety of reports. The first report we look at is the General Health Analysis. And as you can see, it lists things as possible medical conditions detected. Now, what the criteria to make it on this list is that your percentile, as in you have 96% people with less matches than you do, 4% with more. And from literature, we find that 5.4 or 5.5% of people have this condition. So you are high enough and it's common enough that there's a chance you may be within that group. Similar to this one. So as you go down, the things like allergies, 30% of people have allergies. You are well above 70, so there's a good chance you may have allergies happening. Insomnia, yes. In this case, actually, this person does have insomnia. Obesity, etc. Obesity is, well, 42%, 94%. The definition of obesity and microbiome is not as tight as I would like, but it seems to be sufficient. Mood disorders, 30%, 77, potentially there. So all of these are potential things that you may want to take a look at. Hypertension could be a possibility. But all this does is flag things that you may want to talk to your doctor about, just checking to make sure you don't have them, because your microbiome has shifted to be similar to people who have those conditions. It's not a predictive thing. It's somebody saying, hey, excuse me, it's cracks and waddles You may have a duck here. Actually, it could be a different creature, but often it will be an indicator of something which looks very similar to a condition, and you could have that condition. You may not. Next, we have a lesson which is lists bacteria which are known problematic bacteria. We have actually a relatively short list here compared to most people, and the reason it is probably short is because she's so full of rare bacteria that they have not been identified as being problematic because they don't occur enough in a variety of people for it to be isolated and identified. To identify things as problematic, you need a good sample size. If the bacteria is a rare bacteria, you ain't going to get that big sample size easily. And then we have a naturopath in Tasmania, Jason Harlech, and his criteria for what a healthy gut is. I can see they're not ideal, etc. But you are close enough to the ideal that 75% of the people have worse than you do, 25% have better. So it doesn't, his criteria doesn't cause you to stand out like you really have a problem. But if we go back here, you see right here is where we really see the problem coming out, because this is bottom 10%. In theory, 10% of your bacteria should be in the bottom 10%, 10% in the next 20%, etc. So these numbers should all be the same. They're not. You have a whopping number of genuses which you have, which are rarely seen in most people, as in less than 10% of the people will have them, but you have a whopping big number, and if you go down to the species, it's similarly bad. So it really means you are full of unusual bacteria, which means tools for dealing with it is somewhat limited. In fact, probably the best tool, because most of the bacteria you are going to deal with are not ones which are being studied, is to go over to the DNA, and what here we have skill encyclopedia of gene and genomics, and you just click here and wait a few seconds. It has a bunch of calculations to do, and it lists everything's down here, and we have actually 60 suggestions. A lot of these things you'll notice the same number, 727, and the reason all of these are the same number is these are retail probiotic brand names, and they have the same basic species in it, so they have the same value. And you can see 907 is there. You could go and further down the list and you see other things, and the impact in general, you want the one with the highest one, especially when it sticks out well ahead of the rest of them there. Now, so this particular bacteria has it. If you click on it, this one, you go over and you see listed all the species in it, and you can actually see what bacteria it increases or decreases there. So it gives you information as to the profile there. Now we can go back and give me a second. I'll flip up this so I can go back easier. And we can take a look at the next one. And next one, if you click here, you see that there are 5 different bacteria listed there. And if you click on any of, okay, so this is the net effect of them. And for each one of these, you can click on it and see what this specific species does. But here is the net effect of all of them on it. As you see, we have 250 bacteria this particular probiotic will impact. All the information is there. And usually it's more information than a naturopath or MD can keep in their mind, which is why I advocate using artificial intelligence, using all of the data to make your best suggestions coming back. So that's where you get those things coming back. If we go back to my profile and click the AI suggested supplements, and you see here, and the choice, you have a percentage. The default is 10%. You can go to a lower percentage. The percentage are listed to get some idea. You could say, let's go up to 25%. And only a couple of items got added, actually. Nothing, only iron came up. You potentially are, 75% of people have better iron than you do, 25% don't. you may want to just get your iron checked. If it's slightly low, this may actually be the why. It's your microbiome. Okay, so let's go back to the microbiome. We have the everything here, which is antibiotic list for your MD. And as you see here, and what we do is we list them all up, but we stop them when the number is calculated to be 0.1 or negative 0.1 is our cutoff point. And what we do is we look at all the weights of all the things, and the numbers can be some big ugly numbers occasionally, but whatever the numbers are, we scale the highest value is a 1 or -1, and then everything else is proportional to that. And I found that that seems to be something which people have less problem understanding than having a bunch of big numbers kicking around, which they tend to overread into things which are not quite as significant. So here we have the things which are potential good things. If you need an antibiotic for some particular condition, here are the ones you should avoid. Many of the items here could be on list. For example, this person has a provisional Lyme diagnosis, and the Lyme diagnosis will often result in things such as minocycline. It's a very big negative. But if you go over here, and you will see that there are other bacteria over here. I think I made a note in the example, which are also effective against Lyme, but which have a positive impact on the gut. So in theory, by modeling, going with the standard minocycline for Lyme will actually make the gut worse, which means you've got more complications to deal with. If you go to some of the ones here, like with rifamycin or garamycin, chances are it may deal with the Lyme issue, and it may also improve the gut bacteria. Flip over here, and the other list is for a drug list, and this is mainly for things like if you are being prescribed something for conditional hypertension, high blood pressure, diabetes, etc. It will give you a list of things which will help and things that will hurt. And remember, these are person specific. Proton pump inhibitors is the one that would be the best help. And fortunately, that doesn't require a prescription in many spots of the world, which is nice. Epinephrine is another one. Here we have a statin. Here we have a diabetic drug. We have Halmifan, which is popular with some naturopaths, etc. And then over here are things that are likely to make your gut bacteria worse. Yes, you may treat your treatment, but you may end up paying the price in terms of having a worse gut bacteria. So let's go back and let's take a look. You could, if you want to keep track of information offline in Excel, you can download the information there. There's a variety of choices there. And this is if you are wanting to know individually what something will help or hurt, you can go there, and I'll cover that on a separate page. What you should note is that I'm trying to add video walkthroughs almost all the pages to try to explain, to give background, to give information about what the page is about and the details. So basically it's there. You do have the ability to share your samples or a specific sample with somebody else, such as your MD or your naturopath or somebody you know on the internet. Doesn't really matter. And you can update or delete the samples. If you don't want data to be on the site anymore, you can delete it and it will be wiped out totally. If you have multiple samples, you can pick the samples here. This particular person has only one, so that's it. So that's basically the same as the first part of the blog post, just taking you through where this information is coming through. Second part, we go over to changing my microbiome. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a bit of house cleaning first. What I did was we had some existing stuff here and existing stuff here. So I just went to the bottom and just cleared house so that everything would be fresh for you. Now, on the left, we have, if you have some specific conditions, there are some canned analysis there. And the purpose of the canned analysis is to help people who have cognitive impairment, commonly called brain fog, and single click of a button and away, and you get your suggestion. The last one is if you have brain fog and you don't fit into any of those things, you can just click here and it will make all the choices for you. It will show you the bacteria that were selected to be changed and comes down with your suggestions. The number of suggestions are limited, but usually it keeps it very manageable. And again, what we do is we scale, so the highest possible value negatively or positive is a 1, and then we'll scale everything relative there, and then we rank order things from the highest negative, which are usually things you want to take out of your diet, to the highest positive, things you want to add to your diet if there are not compounding medical conditions. Barley is an interesting thing. Some people would be gluten-free and they would avoid barley because it is tagged as being a gluten issue by some naturopaths. Not all, some. There's debate there. It's actually a different form of gluten than wheat gluten, and most people have absolutely no problem with it who have problems with wheat gluten. But that is an issue to discuss with your naturopath and to do your own research. Always be willing to challenge your medical professional. Fish oil, etc. So you see the ranking of things to remove. Often people have a fixed blinkered mindset. They want to know what to add. They don't want to be told what they have to give up. Both are important. If you are taking things that encourages your microbiome dysfunction, it's going to stay there until you get rid of them, reduce them. You need to starve some stuff and feed other stuff, and you need to keep that in balance. You need to remember it. So you want to go through both lists, and one suggestion is to write out your diet of what you eat each day and then go and check this list. But actually, we won't actually do with just this. What we are going to do is look at the consensus report. So we're going to go back to changing your microbiome. And the microbiome consensus report is right here. Here are the most common ways, all very distinct, to change your microbiome. So you can go in and just click one of these, click suggestions, and it will come up with suggestions. You don't have to keep track of them, because what happens behind the scene is to take all the suggestions and save them in a separate file and keep them for 24 hours. So you have all the suggestions and different ways of doing it, and then we'll come back and look at all the suggestions and use that to figure out what you want to do or what you don't want to do. So we have that there, and we go back to our list, just clicking back there, and we'll do standard lab ranges. And we see we have just 5 bacteria. 5 actually is less than most people have. And probably the reason is because we have so many rare bacteria that the regular suspects aren't picked up. And we go to box whiskers. Sorry, I clicked the wrong button. And what it now does is a page that explains what box whiskers are. So if you want to know how that technique happens, then the information is there. Again, another set of suggestions. Molotov is a favorite. It's a proprietary mechanism which looks at the nature of the data. It does pretty good selections. In this case, we get 137, which is pretty good. And the last one, which we do, is the top or bottom 10%. We already know that we are full of rare bacteria, so we know this is going to be a whopping big number. And it is 322, whopping big number. So we now go back and look at the changing microbiome, and we see we have 6 packages of suggestions. You could do more there. I won't, because I know what the result is. Almost all of these end up with the same thing for this particular sample. Your sample, it may be different. And now we can go and let's look at how many suggestions come up. So the first set of suggestions we did, we end up with 500 suggestions, 497, 300. So we have a whole bunch of different suggestions, but you don't have to walk through all of them yourselves and figure out. Everything is added together and you can just view the basket consensus here. And then we have everything there, and we have it in 6 pages or 6 sets of tables. And the first table characteristic is that there's nothing, nobody says to avoid it as the highest priority. You may get some negative aspect, but no high priority. What we do have is a priority which tries to take all of these things. This is how many times the suggestions of the 6 suggestions says take it as a good suggestion. How often it says don't take it. The estimated value, and we're not scaling here, we're just giving a raw number of the net benefit and the avoid benefit, and the net benefit comes from the number of studies indicated desirable effect. So it is biased in terms of what people have studied, unlike the DNA, which is basically relatively unbiased. And you can just click here for sorting or ascending, and then we see which ones have the highest priority there in terms of things to take. And so you may want to go down this list and see which items, for example, lactose is one of those. There, you can go and examine the numbers. So we have all 6 in favor. We have 27 as a positive factor. It has some undesirable effect on some bacteria by the fact that this isn't 0, but you can go down to the list and see different things. So you can go on to the next page, or you can go and see everything, or you can go and say something, okay, I want to only look at herbs and spices. And herbs and spices, oh wow, number 1 choice is marijuana. So you perhaps should be happy. Doesn't say if you should smoke it or have it as an edible, but probably as an edible. And then rhubarb is another one, noni, anisette. So you can go and sort it there. Diet style, high fiber diet is the highest priority. Avocado peel, not what you usually eat. Moderate protein, moderate carbohydrates. High saturated milk fat, which is an interesting one. This person does have a problem with milk, so you may want to exclude that. All of these are suggestions only, and all that each suggestion does is increase the probability of an improvement. Doesn't guarantee an improvement, it just increases the probability of improvement. Then we have safer ones next, and you can again sort it, and you see things here. And there we have sometimes in the suggestions it say avoid, sometimes it says take it. So we could go and take a look here and sort it, and sort in variety of order. So we can go and figure out which ones you want to do. Again, these are suggestions. Here we have vitamin B7, vitamin B3. A little bit of hesitancy, but in general, pretty good. And then we have the higher risk one. So the priority here is you want the priority to avoid is high red meat is definite. Stevia, saccharin are to be avoided. Broccoli. And this is the avoid priority here. And you can think of it as taking this number minus that number, and then fact, which gives you somewhere around 17, and then factor it by the number of times it says to avoid, and you end up with this number here. And here we have time, oil, etc. Higher risk. Again, in this case we have no numbers. It basically says, things aren't clear enough one way or the other. The another one. And here we have some negatives only, and often for the list you have to do a little bit of looking at the wrong number. the void is sitting there and the take is there, and you have a take count being higher than the void count, which is probably why you end up with sort of an oddball negative number. So you can go by priority number, which probably I'll be adjusting the formula over time, but the take number and the void number and the take count and the void count often can be contradictory, in which case the value of 0 is appropriate, as in, not sure whether or not you should take it or not take it, we don't know. In one sense, these items are a bit of playing Russian roulette because we don't know enough which way it's going to push things. If you can avoid them, then probably good to avoid them. So you're not spinning the cylinder or playing Russian roulette. You're simply avoiding the whole question entirely. So that takes you through the consensus report, and that's basically covers the pages. Handpicked bacteria, there are several ways of doing the handpicked bacteria. I will not go through that process at the moment. There's a separate one. If you go over here, and you can go and do it by picking a variety of ways. And actually, I think, I know at public, you have to increase to advanced level to see the ways of hand picking bacteria. There's a whole bunch of ways of picking it. For example, you could go and say, okay, I want to add in bacteria which 80% of people have, which I don't have, and you seem to have just about all. This person seems to have about all of them. 70. So these are bacteria 70% of people have, which you don't have. 70% you have or not having. Some people will get hit at 90%. You have a bacteria everybody else has. So you don't have a bacteria everybody else has, and now you can toss this into your handpicked selection. And going back, and we have other ways of doing it. You can go in and, for example, the bacteria tree is helpful to understand the bacteria hierarchy. Bacteria is organized in levels like countries, states, counties, cities, neighborhood, etc. So you can think of it as a crime map. And as you go down, you see, okay, these areas have high rates of crime. It's just particular neighborhood of this city in this county. So that basically helps you identify, okay, so these are the ones I want to go and change. So you just put a check mark here, and they get picked to your hand, added to your hand-picked bacteria list. So we won't go through that. That's a whole separate study, and video walkthrough are being added to the pages, hopefully with better sound because of the mic improvement. But so let's go back to the new one, which is building a handpicked collection using symptoms. First thing is you have to have symptoms added. If you have not added symptoms to your sample, you ain't going where. How do you add sample to your sample? You actually go to where is it? Actually, I have dropped that from the page. It should have been there. If you go to the old report and look underneath symptoms, you can go and enter symptoms here and do it. So let's get back to where I'll fix that thing. I'm reorganizing this menu, so the result is reorganization isn't complete. So we're doing a handpicked using symptoms, and all the symptoms listed here are symptoms this person has reported. So you also see after each symptom the number of people who reported the same thing. So what we do is we go and select some characteristic which ideally is a significant factor, which is not necessarily the bottom one. We can factor in things like blood type, age, gender, But let's take something like general depression. We have 237 people to it. We click that, add to list, and that's now in a list. Now below we have the list of people who have that symptom and other symptoms and the number after it. For example, hypothyroidism, add that to the list. And now we have the people who have those two symptoms and other things, and you can go in and do something else like hair loss. You can add that to the list. You can go down as far as you feel like it. However, once you get down below 10 or below 40, then you probably should stop. And then you can go in and just click here, and it will go and show you all the bacteria which matches all those other people. So these are the potential bacteria which could be causing those issues here, and you can go in and you can do modifications here, and there'll be a separate video and a video link up here in a few days on doing it. And you can go in and do something like, I'm going to remove all those things, and I'm going to temporarily change to the above subset. And now we go over and we go and get suggestions for this set of bacteria. And there we have suggestions. And guess what? A bunch of the stuff is very similar. Barley, walnuts, etc. The DNA was interesting because one of the issues pointed out was magnesium. Walnuts are very high in magnesium, which makes sense that they probably help with the magnesium in them is what is helping the microbiome. Now we can go back here and we can say, okay, let's go up and let's see if we can get a tighter picking. And when we do that, it makes a criteria that is required to put to match up against other people much tighter, and we only get a grand total of 5 bacteria here. And now we can go and just click get suggestions, and we can go over and get a list of suggestions here. Chlorine deficiency is something to add, and that means you may want to look at your diet to find out what your sources of chlorine is. Not necessarily always good to reduce it. It's something to be discussed with a medical professional. But if you don't have a chlorine problem, you may want to reduce your intake of it. And then we have a whole bunch of other oddball things like rhubarb, dairy. This person has trouble with dairy, which is probably because of the microbiome bacteria she has doesn't have the ones who handle dairy. Getting calcium in. Dairy and calcium tend to be associated, which may be why. And then we have things to avoid. Very short list. And why is the short list? Because there's only 5 bacteria there. And most of this bacteria we don't have studies from. So that is a problem. If we don't have information, how can we know how to adjust it? Okay, let's flip back to the advanced suggestion because I want to show you how we get the suggestions. Down at the bottom, you have things like include or don't include probiotic ones. I'm going to check just one. You have to be on advanced level in order to get this choice. Basically, the purpose of the levels is to hide stuff that will confuse people. So I'll go in there and I'll just click antibiotics there as a FYI. And now when I click it, I can set the numbers here to be higher numbers. Let's say I drop that to 40 and 40 and show suggestions in new windows. And there we have it. And now what we have is we have a stack of books here. Stack of books indicates where the information is coming from. In the blog post, I showed example for cacao. I'm going to actually click on barley. And there we have the studies for barley. And barley, 137 medical studies were cited. Here is a study, and what the study says, it says that it decreases this particular bacteria, which is one of those which were picked to be decreased. And this is the study saying it decreases that one. Next one, something which gets decreases, and goes on and on and on. And you can go and, if you want to, you can go and pick a name of one of the bacteria and just type in a name there, and it will sort out the studies which deals with that one. So this is exactly what you want to know. This is the evidence for how the suggestions are being generated. And as you see, 137 different studies are being used. And then that is a lot of information for a human to keep in their mind. It's not much information for a well-written computer program to keep in mind and to factor in. And of course, you have the links here for the summary there, which takes you over here. And in this case, it happened to be from a vet study, and often vet studies are sufficient. If you don't have a human study, a vet study is better than having no study. And if you go back here, you will actually get to see the full publication. Here's the abstract. You can download the PDF from the site. That's how we get the studies. Very simple and very comprehensive approach. Okay, now that covers most of the stuff I did in the blog post up to this point. So let's go back and see what I have not covered. Okay, I covered a trip into the wilderness, which I won't go into. I'll do a separate video on that. In this case, it did not bring anything particularly helpful. Chlorine deficiency shows up because the bacteria that impacts the bacteria you are changing are impacted by chlorine deficiency. So you want to try reducing the chlorine intake. And so that's bottom line. A couple of things in terms of the question came back was too much information, which I get it. You just saw all the information, which is why I said earlier, stop. And why? Because generally the DNA results, if you have problems handling large volume of information, is probably your best starting point if it lists a bunch of stuff there. Some cases it will not. Sometimes it's total wiped out, in which case we then have to go over to the more complicated suggestions there. So that was the first thing, which is walk with the DNA. Next thing, she went and looked up one of them, and she found that there are 3 different probiotics. I had actually just named it, and I did not do each one of the 3 because all of them have the identical same bacteria in them here. And my advice was look up the pricing, and all 3 of them have the same prices. What the difference is that some contain additional prebiotics, and in which case, if you're not looking at or factoring which prebiotics are good and which prebiotics are bad, you want to avoid the prebiotics. If you're working from the DNA alone of the bacteria in the probiotics, then you go with this one. It's not only is it just the probiotics or close to just the probiotics as possible, it's also the cheapest, which helps with your monthly budget. And so that's basically it. There's other things there she had no trouble finding. So again, I used the retail product name there. Now, dosage becomes a bit of an interesting thing because there's a dosage on the bottle. Often the dosage on the bottle is whatever the manufacturer wants to toss out there. Often there are no clinical studies to back it, and often they won't even give you the studies if there is one. So I do have a list, a page, which basically lists probiotics, probiotics and supplements and clinical studies which are used, so you can see what typically are used by medical professionals in clinical studies, and also whether or not the dosage was effective. So we find the following thing. We find studies which gives it milligrams, and milligrams are not on many probiotics label. They do instead give millions community forming units, MCFUs, or billion community unit community forming units. So what we have is 2 capsules is 1 billion CFUs, i.e. 1,000 MCFUs is what's on the bottle. But what we really want to do is to be at the high end of the clinical studies. So suggestion is very simple, and it's good for all supplements and for all things. Start at the low dosage and work up. In this case, I suggest you take 2 capsules for the first day, 2 capsules the second day, and then add 2 more the next day, and keep adding 2 more each day until you finish with the bottle, or most part of a month have happened. And there, in this case, what we find is that you will be done when you hit 20 capsules. You will be done. There's only 60 capsules in the bottle, and you would have used all of them. So at which point of time you want to go on and move on to the next one. And I went on, and we also have Miranism and the everything there, and I need to check. I may not have updated the blog post. I hope I haven't lost my up edits. Okay, next question was when to take. Bedtime seems the best. There's disagreement out there. Some people say, oh, you should empty stomach after a meal, which is correct. If bedtime should not be eating before bedtime, so that is actually an agreement. But more importantly is, as this newspaper article will explain, generally at bedtime before night is usually the best time, because your immune system and your body will basically be revitalizing the immune system. Taking probiotics at the same time will help that revitalization. For myself and some people, you will find that you have a much deeper sleep. I know one probiotic, which my wife, who has insomnia issues, has been taking, has been Akkermansia. Not that this person this, but she has been sleeping so much better when she takes Akkermansia just before bedtime. And same thing happened. There are a few cases where the probiotics will cause the body system to actually produce insomnia, in which case for those, switch to 1 hour after breakfast in the day. There. How long do you want to take it? I didn't use it to edit. Generally, you want, here is where it becomes interesting. The common misperception out there is you're taking probiotics so that you get that probiotic living in your gut. Wrong. That probiotic will usually, for 99% of retail probiotics, be gone totally from the gut, be undetectable 12 hours later, wiped out. They just don't survive. They don't take up residence, and there's a ton of reasons for them not taking up residence. They will have an effect, and the effect that they will have is that they produce antibiotic compounds against other bacteria. So they are basically persuading other bacteria to reproduce less. And that is how the effect is. So when we flip to looking at probiotics as being natural antibiotics, and most antibiotics are coming from bacteria, that's the reality of it, is that we should take a look at the best courses for prolonged antibiotics, especially multiple. And the studies have shown that antibiotic rotation is far more effective than taking the same antibiotic constantly. And it actually makes sense. Why? Because a percentage of the bacteria the antibiotic working against will have mutations and will be resistant. So if you keep on doing the same thing, those resistant ones will start to populate and keep growing and repopulate, and you'll be back with the same situation you had before. If you flip to a different antibiotic, then the survivors from the first one will have to survive the second one, so they will be wiped out more. Let's suppose the first antibiotic takes 90% of the bacteria out. 10% are left. You change antibiotics. It takes 90% of bacteria out of it. What are you down to? You're down to 1%. If you take a third one that perhaps performs the same, you're now down to 0.1%. 0.1% is likely enough for the body to keep in control. You basically may have won the war. How do you do it? 3 different types of antibiotics. Similarly here, you want to do 3 different types of probiotics. So you need to know what is in each one and make sure each one is different. And in terms of her best suggestion, Mary Reason comes along, and there's 330 tablets in the bottle. Again, starting with a low dosage, working up. It takes her 21 days to get rid of the bottle, in which case, no. Time to go on the third one. The third one is one I should mention. You can do it a variety of ways. The cheapest way is custom probiotics, because they are by far the cheapest for every CFU of anything out there. Not only are they the cheapest, they actually identify the strain of it, and they are a pure probiotic. They have no additives, no prebiotics to it. It's just pure what they have specified. And in this case, the recommended dosage is several times higher than the best dosage used in any clinical study, which means you don't even have to use their recommended dosage. You can do a child's dosage, and it will be just as effective. And in that case, basically keep on 3 or 4 weeks. You will barely go through half a bottle. You may even just go through a quarter of a bottle. Very, very cheap in terms of impact. So you got 3 there. There's more on the list. You could go there, but these 3 would be your minimum. What I would suggest would be your minimum rotation. Where does the information come from? Well, basically 2 sources. As you saw in the walkthrough, it comes from the U.S. National Library of Medicine and the links to the studies. And we have 1.8 million facts I gathered from those clinical studies. A lot of reading, believe me, a lot of reading. Some of it is by mechanical extraction, which is then hand verified. And then from the Kyoto Encyclopedia of Gene Genomics, and we have 8 million facts there. So we have roughly 10 million facts going into a mathematical model, which looks at your bacteria and tries balancing, figuring out what helps, what doesn't help for each one of them, and then aggregates everything over the whole world and come up with a suggestion. Something which I doubt any naturopath or any MD is able to keep in their brain or even figure out how to do it on paper with Excel spreadsheet, because Excel spreadsheet, you will get bigger data than Excel will be able to handle actually, which is the rather shocking thing. However, I'm a software developer. I've written AI systems. I've worked as a data scientist. I'm a data nerd. So I have no problem handling that. Again, simply showing how we get the thing, how the suggestions are. And basically that's it. That's roughly a long-winded introduction to some of the key points of the site. And let's do a recap. You have uploaded or transferred your microbiome to our site, and as a result of it, you can do a quick view of what your microbiome looks like. So you can do a health analysis, which identifies if there's any particular bacteria which is of a great concern. You also see whether or not you have a normal or abnormal distribution of bacteria. If you have a lot of rare bacteria, it's going to be hard for anybody to treat you, because most of the bacteria nobody has a clue about. Not quite. If you use DNA of the bacteria and the DNA of your microbiome, you have a clue, a reasonably good clue, which is why for this particular person who has this oddity, these suggestions really are a lifesaver, because they are pretty good. You can have when dealing with your MD, you can go and show them I would suggest you go and you print off the page. There, I have a prologue at the top explaining to your MD what's going on, so you can sit down and hopefully negotiate with your MD, persuade them to give something that will help your gut and also deal with the issue to try and do address, rather than dealing with that address and saying, oh, well, your gut, well, nothing to do about it. There is. You can do a lot about it. Just have to get knowledgeable. Same with other drug lists are there. So, and we have the Kyoto, which is a DNA base, which is probably in some ways the best. It's something which I'm still going to continue to working on. There's a lot of information, but the problem is getting it into something which is usable for you. If the DNA Kyoto data doesn't come up with many suggestions, or you want to just go on, you can now go over and get the suggestion lists, whole variety of different ways. Remember, the key thing is trying to identify which bacteria you want to change. You've got a choice of 800 bacteria. You could be chasing red herrings all over the ocean, rather than going for a salmon or beluga whale. So you want to identify the ones that are really causing the problem. Here is a couple. All these are either by experienced ones or by standard mathematical models, these two. Or you can just simply say top, bottom, X percent. All of these will give a list of suggestions using that criteria to select your bacteria. The bacteria you selected determines your suggestions, and the suggestions are based on whatever has been studied, and we don't have a great amount of material studied. We only have 1.8 million facts, which sounds big, but not when you're dealing with 14,000 different bacteria of concern. 14,000 into that doesn't give that many bits and pieces, and frequently there's nothing. You can handpick bacteria. There's a bunch of things here for handpicking it, but that requires generally a lot more knowledge about the microbiome, which we won't go there. What we do have when you enter your symptoms is to be able to use your symptoms to select the bacteria, which is probably one of the sweetest way of doing it, because you are identifying them by where you and other people are in consensus. Ideally, you want to go and find a combination of symptoms. Again, it's a slow process where you get strong or very strong relationships coming through. In which case, you really have identified the key bacteria that seems to be causing the particular collection of symptoms you're looking at. So that's basically it. Everything is there. Remember, whatever you decide upon should be reviewed by your medical professional. I'm not a medical person. I am just a data scientist who knows how to build artificial intelligence systems and how to get data from a variety of sources and how to manipulate it. I have a Master of Science. I am not an MD. So that's basically it. Hopefully it's useful, and explore the site, and hopefully it'll be there to help you and be beneficial. There's a whole bunch of choices across the top, which I won't go into.